Hello everyone, my name is Erin Slattery, and this presentation will be covering some of the legal and ethical issues that I've noticed while reviewing this week's case study. First, I'll start by defining the difference of virus versus worm. According to Kaspersky, a prominent cybersecurity company, the primary difference between a virus and a worm is that viruses must be triggered by the activation of their host, whereas worms are standalone malicious programs that can self-replicate independently as soon as they have breached the system. Worms do not require activation, unlike viruses. Viruses are often attached or concealed in shared or downloaded files, and when the host file is accepted or loaded by a target system, the virus remains dormant until the infected host file is activated. Once it is activated, the virus can run, executing malicious code and replicating to infect other files on the system. In contrast, worms don't require the activation of their host file. Once a worm has entered the system, usually via a network connection or as a downloaded file, it can run, self-replicate, and propagate without triggering an event. The worm can make multiple copies of itself and spread across the network or through an internet connection to infect other connected devices. Now I'll begin by dissecting this week's case study. The first violation that Robert the physical therapist had happen through his actions was he violated informed consent. Informed consent was defined by the eHealth Code of Ethics as respecting users' right to determine whether or how their personal data may be collected, used, or shared. The physical therapist did not divulge to his patients that he was collecting their personal data, how he was utilizing their information, or what he planned to do with their health data. Robert should not have collected, used, or shared patient data without specific affirmative consent. Using patient information without their informed consent is in direct violation of the principles of ethics, which is meant to safeguard both patients and providers. His action of automatically enrolling his patients violated this principle. This would be concerning to patients because the assumption is that their personal information is safe in the hands of their treatment team. His misuse of his patients' information could lead to distrust or dissatisfaction with their care and their safety. The second issue that I'd like to highlight from this case study is Robert's violation of professionalism. As outlined by the eHealth Code of Ethics, professionalism means that physicians, nurses, pharmacists, therapists, and all other healthcare professionals who provide specific personal medical care or advice online should abide by the ethical codes that govern their professions as practitioners in face-to-face relationships, practice non-maleficence or do no harm, put patients' and clients' interests first, and protect patients' confidentiality. In Robert's case, he failed to abide by the principle of professionalism. His actions did not abide by the ethical codes that govern healthcare professionals' practice because he violated the principle of informed consent. Through his actions, Robert did not put the interests of his patients first because he did not communicate with them if they felt that this course of action would be beneficial to their treatment. Robert also did not protect confidentiality. He accessed his patients' information at home without their knowledge or consent and exposed their personal information to his other patients when he created a list for groups of his patients. Finally, Robert also violated the principle of non-maleficence or do no harm because his list ultimately inflicted damage onto the personal devices of his patients. Another violation that I wanted to highlight is Robert's violation of HIPAA. HIPAA defines protected health information as information relating to one's physical or mental health, the provision of one's health care, or the payment for that health care that has been maintained or transmitted electronically and that can be reasonably identified with the individual it applies to. Robert used protected health information from patient charts in order to identify patients with similar conditions and place them into a shared resource group. This action violated HIPAA guidelines for how healthcare providers should handle patient information. Due to HIPAA guidelines, Robert would have to complete training and sign documents stating that he would follow and uphold privacy procedures. His actions in this case were in direct violation of his training and signed statements. HIPAA also requires that all health information needs to be de-identified before being released. This guideline is in place to protect the identity of the patient. When Robert sent out lists to his patients, he used personal email addresses, which would be considered a personal identifier. Robert's violation of HIPAA guidelines is legal in nature, and he could face consequences of these actions from his place of work and the impacted patients. This may include fines and imprisonment. Some suggestions to improve Robert's plan of action would be that Robert should have pursued other avenues in order to give his patients access to information. One such means of information dissemination is a personal health record or a patient portal. With meaningful use guidelines for Stage 3, most healthcare institutions will have a patient health record. Robert could have used this technology to share peer-reviewed and quality resources privately to his patients. Using a personal health record would have been a better option because this is an organization-managed platform that ensures patient privacy and security of information. Another route that Robert could have pursued would be to use his institution's resources to form a support group and organize resources. This would allow the patients to exercise their autonomy. Robert's patients could participate if they wished to, and it could be done with the institution's knowledge and support for these efforts of building a sense of community.